I just wanted to park my car and go to sleep. But my neighbor Linda hated me so much she lied to police and said I was a criminal. Now the governor is dying in my driveway and my whole life is destroyed forever. Before watching full story, comment below from where are you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. My name is David Martinez and I never thought that opening my garage door would lead to the most tragic night in our state's history. But sometimes one person's hatred can create a storm that destroys everything in its path. I had been living at 428 Oakwood Drive for 8 months. It was a quiet neighborhood in Cedar Falls, the kind of place where children rode bikes on sidewalks and neighbors waved to each other over garden fences. I was a paramedic with the city, working long shifts to save lives, and this little house represented everything I had worked for. But Linda Brennan hated me from the moment I moved in. Linda was 62 years old, with gray hair always pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that seemed to find fault with everything. She had lived at 426 Oakwood Drive for 37 years and believed she owned the entire street. As the HOA president, she treated every rule like a sacred law and every violation like a personal attack. From day one, Linda made it clear that I didn't belong in her neighborhood. Maybe it was because I was Latino in a mostly white area. Maybe it was because I worked nights and slept during the day, disrupting her idea of a normal schedule. Or maybe she was just a miserable person who enjoyed making others suffer. It started small. She measured my grass with a ruler and sent violation notices if it was 1 inch too long. She complained that my mailbox was the wrong shade of blue. She called the city when I parked my work van in my own driveway, claiming it was commercial vehicle pollution in a residential area. David, warned my neighbor Tom, an elderly man who had watched Linda terrorize the street for decades, that woman has driven out 5 families in 10 years. She finds ways to make life impossible until people just give up and leave. I tried to be patient. I followed every HOA rule perfectly. I even hired a professional landscaping service to make sure my yard met Linda's impossible standards. But nothing was ever good enough. Linda's complaints grew more frequent and more vicious. She filed reports claiming my music was too loud when I wasn't even home. She accused me of running a business from my garage when all I did was work on my motorcycle. She even called animal control, claiming I had a vicious dog when I didn't own any pets. The breaking point came on a cold February evening. I had worked a double shift, helping save 3 lives in a terrible car accident. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, and just wanted to get home to rest. When I pulled into my driveway at 11:30 p.m., I never imagined it would be the last normal moment of my life. As I pressed my garage door remote, Linda was watching from her bedroom window. She had been waiting for this moment, planning it for weeks. In her twisted mind, she had convinced herself that I was some kind of criminal, and tonight she would finally prove it. The moment my garage door started opening, Linda grabbed her phone and dialed 911. "There's a Hispanic man breaking into a house on Oakwood Drive," she screamed into the phone, her voice shaking with fake panic. "He's using some kind of electronic device to break into the garage. He's going to rob the place or worse. You need to send officers with guns immediately." "Ma'am, what's your exact location?" the dispatcher asked calmly. 428 Oakwood Drive. "He just broke in. He's inside the garage now. This man is dangerous. I've seen him working with tools and equipment. He could have weapons. Send officers now before he kills someone." Linda knew exactly what she was doing. She didn't mention that she had watched me come home every night for 8 months. She didn't mention that it was my house, my garage, my property. She painted a picture of a dangerous Hispanic man committing a violent crime, knowing that would bring the fastest and most aggressive police response. "Officers are on their way, ma'am. Stay inside and keep your doors locked." "Thank God," Linda said, satisfaction creeping into her voice. "Finally, someone will do something about this menace." Within minutes, 3 patrol cars were racing toward Oakwood Drive, sirens wailing. The officers believed they were responding to a home invasion in progress, possibly with an armed and dangerous suspect. I was inside my garage, completely unaware that my life was about to change forever. I had just turned off my motorcycle and was removing my helmet when I heard the sirens approaching. They seemed to be getting closer, but I assumed they were heading to some emergency elsewhere in the city. I pressed the button to close my garage door and walked toward the door that led into my house. That's when I heard the shouting outside. The garage door was halfway down when the police cars screeched into my driveway. Bright spotlights flooded through the narrowing gap, and I could hear car doors slamming and officers yelling commands. "Police, stop right there." My heart started pounding. I had no idea what was happening. Was there a dangerous criminal nearby? Was someone in trouble? Put your hands where we can see them. That's when I realized they were yelling at me. I raised my hands immediately, my helmet falling to the garage floor with a loud clatter. Officers. I called out, trying to keep my voice calm. I'm David Martinez. I live here. This is my house. Get on the ground now. I dropped to my knees on the cold concrete, my hands raised high above my head. Through the gap under the garage door, I could see the shadows of officers taking positions, and I heard the terrifying sound of weapons being drawn. Please, I said, my voice breaking with fear, there's been a mistake. I'm a paramedic with Cedar Falls EMS. This is my home. My ID is in my wallet. 3 officers rushed under the garage door, their guns pointed directly at me. Their faces were tense, their breathing heavy with adrenaline. They truly believed they had caught a dangerous criminal in the act. Don't move, the first officer shouted. Keep your hands up. I stayed perfectly still, kneeling on my garage floor surrounded by my motorcycle, my tools, and family photos on the walls. Everything around me proved this was my home, but the officers only saw what Linda had described, a Hispanic man in a garage at night. Officer, please, I said carefully, I'm a first responder. I work with police all the time. My badge is in my jacket pocket. My driver's license shows this address. The lead officer, Sergeant Williams, kept his weapon trained on me while his partner, Officer Jackson, approached to check my identification. I could see the fear and confusion in their eyes. They were following protocol for a dangerous situation, but something didn't feel right. Officer Jackson pulled out my wallet with shaking hands. He looked at my paramedic badge, then my driver's license, then back at me. Sergeant, he said quietly, this is David Martinez, Cedar Falls EMS. The license shows this address. For a moment, nobody moved. The officers were realizing that something was very wrong with this call. Just as Sergeant Williams was beginning to lower his weapon, we heard another car pulling into the driveway. More headlights cut through the darkness, and a familiar voice called out from outside. Officers, what's the situation here? It was Governor Helen Rodriguez, returning home from a late meeting with state legislators. She lived just 4 houses down from me at 416 Oakwood Drive, and she had seen the police cars and flashing lights as she turned onto our street. Governor Rodriguez was in her first term, a former prosecutor who had built her career fighting for justice and police accountability. She was driving herself home that night without her usual security detail, because she believed in staying connected to her community. Governor Rodriguez, Sergeant Williams said, clearly surprised and nervous. We received a call about a break-in in progress at this address. The governor walked toward the garage, and I could see her silhouette against the flashing police lights. She looked around at the scene, me kneeling on the floor with my hands up, the officers with their weapons drawn, my personal belongings scattered around the garage. And this gentleman? She asked, nodding toward me. Ma'am, this is David Martinez. He claims to live here and his ID confirms this address. He's also a city paramedic. I could hear the confusion in Sergeant Williams' voice. The situation wasn't matching the emergency call they had received. Officers, Governor Rodriguez said firmly, please lower your weapons. Mr. Martinez, you may stand up. I slowly got to my feet, my legs shaking with relief and residual terror. The officers holstered their guns, but I could see they were still tense and confused. Who reported this alleged break-in? The governor asked. Sergeant Williams checked his radio. Dispatch, can you confirm the source of the 911 call to 428 Oakwood Drive? The call came from Linda Brennan at 426 Oakwood Drive. She reported a home invasion in progress with a potentially armed Hispanic male. Governor Rodriguez's expression grew dark. She had dealt with false reports and racial profiling cases throughout her legal career, and she recognized the pattern immediately. Mrs. Brennan, she called toward Linda's house, could you please come outside? We need to speak with you about your 911 call. Linda had been watching from her bedroom window, and her face went white when she saw Governor Rodriguez standing in my driveway. They had met several times at community events, and Linda had always boasted about knowing the governor personally. But now, faced with the consequences of her actions, Linda panicked. Instead of coming outside to explain herself, she grabbed her phone and made another call. 911? This is Linda Brennan again. The situation on Oakwood Drive is escalating. There are more people here now and I think they're all working together. The governor is here but I think she might be in danger. These criminals might hurt her. Linda's second call created chaos at the dispatch center. Now they had reports of multiple suspects and a threat to the governor's safety. Additional units were immediately dispatched, including officers from neighboring jurisdictions who didn't know the background of the situation. Meanwhile, Governor Rodriguez was trying to de-escalate the situation in my driveway. "Mr. Martinez," she said gently, "can you explain what happened here tonight?" "Governor, I just got home from work," I said, my voice still shaking. "I'm a paramedic, I worked a double shift today. I opened my garage door like I do every night, and suddenly police cars were everywhere. I had no idea what was happening." "Have you had any previous issues with Mrs. Brennan?" "Yes, ma'am. She's been harassing me since the day I moved in. Constant HOA violations, false complaints to the city, threats about getting me evicted. But I never thought she would." My words were interrupted by the sound of more sirens approaching. 4 additional patrol cars were racing toward Oakwood Drive, responding to Linda's second false report about an escalating dangerous situation. "Governor," Sergeant Williams said urgently, "dispatch is reporting additional threats. We should get you to safety." But Governor Rodriguez was an experienced prosecutor who understood what was happening. "Sergeant, I believe Mrs. Brennan is filing false reports. We need to speak with her immediately before this situation gets any worse." She walked toward Linda's front door and knocked firmly. "Mrs. Brennan, this is Governor Rodriguez. You need to come outside and explain these 911 calls." Linda finally came to her front door, but instead of stepping outside, she cracked it open just enough to speak through the gap. "Governor Rodriguez," she called out in a fake panicked voice. "Thank God you're here. These criminals are trying to break into houses all over the neighborhood. You need to get away from them before they hurt you." "Mrs. Brennan," the governor said firmly, "Mr. Martinez lives at that house. He was entering his own garage. Why did you report a break-in?" "I don't know who he is." Linda lied desperately. "I've never seen him before. He was using some kind of device to break into that garage. You can't trust him." At that moment, the additional patrol cars arrived, their sirens screaming and lights flashing. These officers had been told they were responding to an escalating situation with multiple suspects and a threat to the governor. The new officers jumped out of their cars with weapons drawn, not understanding the context of what they were walking into. They saw the governor standing in the street, me near my garage, and other officers already on scene. "Governor, get away from the suspects," one of the new officers shouted. "There are no suspects," Governor Rodriguez called back. "This is a misunderstanding." But in the chaos and confusion, with bright flashing lights and multiple people shouting commands, the situation spiraled out of control. One of the newly arrived officers, Officer Peterson, was young and inexperienced. He had been on the force for only 8 months, and this was his first high-stress situation. He saw the governor in what he believed was a dangerous confrontation, and he made a split-second decision that would haunt him forever. Officer Peterson raised his weapon toward me, believing I was threatening the governor. But in the darkness and confusion, with all the flashing lights and people moving around, his aim was off. The gunshot echoed through the quiet neighborhood like thunder. But the bullet didn't hit me. It hit Governor Rodriguez. The world seemed to stop. Governor Rodriguez fell to the ground, clutching her chest, blood spreading across her white blouse. The sound that came from her throat was something I'll never forget, a gasping, choking cry of pain and surprise. "Officer down, Governor down." Sergeant Williams screamed into his radio. "We need ambulances now." I immediately dropped to my knees beside the governor, my paramedic training taking over despite the chaos around me. She had been shot in the chest and blood was flowing freely from the wound. "Governor, stay with me," I said, applying pressure to the wound with my hands. "You're going to be okay. Help is coming." Her eyes found mine, wide with shock and pain. She tried to speak, but blood was filling her lungs. "Don't talk," I whispered. "Save your strength. I've got you." The officers were in complete panic. Officer Peterson stood frozen, his weapon still in his hands, staring at what he had done. Sergeant Williams was shouting orders, trying to secure the scene and get medical help. "Where are the ambulances?" he screamed into his radio. "En route ETA 4 minutes, dispatch responded." "She doesn't have 4 minutes," I shouted. "We need to move her now." I looked up at the officers surrounding us. "My ambulance is parked at the station 6 blocks away. If we put her in a patrol car and drive there, I can get her stabilized into the hospital faster." Sergeant Williams nodded immediately. "Jackson, get your car." As we carefully lifted Governor Rodriguez into the patrol car, I caught sight of Linda's front window. She was still watching, and for just a moment our eyes met. The look on her face wasn't satisfaction or fear, it was pure horror at what her lies had caused. The ride to Cedar Falls Memorial Hospital was the longest 6 minutes of my life. I sat in the back of the patrol car with Governor Rodriguez, working desperately to keep her alive. Her breathing was shallow and labored. The bullet had punctured her lung and she was bleeding internally. I used my uniform shirt to apply pressure to the wound, trying to slow the bleeding until we could get her to surgery. "Stay with me, Governor," I kept saying. "Keep your eyes open. Focus on my voice." She squeezed my hand weakly and I could see her trying to stay conscious. This woman who had dedicated her life to public service, who had fought for justice and police reform, was dying because of one person's hatred and fear. When we reached the hospital, the trauma team was already waiting. I had called ahead using my radio, giving them all the medical information they needed to prepare for her arrival. GSW to the chest, possible pneumothorax, significant blood loss, I reported as we rushed her into the trauma bay. "She's been conscious but deteriorating rapidly." Dr. Sarah Kim, the head of emergency medicine and my longtime colleague, took over immediately. "David, what happened out there?" she asked as the team worked to stabilize the governor. "A false 911 call led to a confrontation," I said, my voice breaking. "An officer shot her by mistake in the confusion." Dr. Kim's face went pale. She had known Governor Rodriguez personally. They had worked together on healthcare reform legislation. "We're going to do everything we can," she promised. For the next 3 hours, I sat in the hospital waiting room while Governor Rodriguez fought for her life in surgery. Word of the shooting had spread quickly, and soon the hospital was surrounded by news crews, state officials and concerned citizens. The story was already hitting national news: governor shot by police in mistaken identity case. While I waited at the hospital, Linda was experiencing her own kind of hell at home on Oakwood Drive. The street was now a crime scene with investigators, forensic teams and news crews everywhere. Linda's house was surrounded by reporters asking questions she couldn't answer without incriminating herself. "Mrs. Brennan, why did you call 911 tonight? Mrs. Brennan, did you know Mr. Martinez lived next door? Mrs. Brennan, do you feel responsible for the governor being shot?" Linda locked herself in her house, but she couldn't escape the reality of what she had done. Her false reports had directly led to Governor Rodriguez being shot. The woman she claimed to admire and support was fighting for her life because of Linda's lies. The FBI arrived within hours to begin their investigation. False reports that lead to the shooting of a state governor constitute federal crimes, and Linda was now facing charges that could put her in prison for the rest of her life. When federal agents knocked on her door with a search warrant, Linda finally understood that her world was about to collapse. "Mrs. Brennan, you need to come with us for questioning," Agent Martinez, no relation to me, said as they placed her in handcuffs. "This isn't my fault," Linda screamed as they led her to their car. "I was just trying to protect the neighborhood. How was I supposed to know the governor would be there?" Her words revealed everything. She still didn't understand that the real problem was her false report, not the tragic consequences that followed. News of the shooting sent shockwaves through Cedar Falls and across the entire state. Governor Rodriguez was popular and respected, known for her work on criminal justice reform and community relations. My neighbors on Oakwood Drive were devastated. Many of them had witnessed Linda's harassment campaign against me over the past 8 months, and they felt guilty for not doing more to stop it. Tom, my elderly neighbor, came to the hospital to check on me and the governor's condition. "David, I'm so sorry," he said, tears in his eyes. "I knew Linda was getting worse, but I never thought. I should have done something to stop her." "Tom, this isn't your fault," I told him. "None of us could have predicted she would do something this extreme." But Tom shook his head. "We all saw what she was doing to you. We knew it was wrong. We just hoped it would stop on its own." Other neighbors shared similar feelings of guilt and regret. They had watched Linda terrorize me for months, filing false complaints and making my life miserable, but they had been too afraid or too apathetic to intervene. Mrs. Patterson, who lived across the street, organized a prayer vigil for Governor Rodriguez. More than 200 people gathered in the hospital parking lot, holding candles and praying for her recovery. "Tonight, our community learned a terrible lesson about the consequences of hatred and silence," she said to the crowd. "We failed to protect our neighbor David from harassment, and now we're all paying the price." The vigil was covered by national news, showing a community grappling with its own complicity in allowing hate to flourish. The FBI's investigation into the shooting revealed the full extent of Linda's harassment campaign against me. Agents found hundreds of documents in her house, photos she had taken of my property, detailed logs of my daily activities, copies of false complaints she had filed, and even research she had done on how to get undesirable residents evicted from HOA communities. Most disturbing was a journal Linda had kept, documenting her escalating hatred and plans to deal with the Martinez problem. February 10th, he came home late again. These people have no respect for decent neighborhoods. February 15th, filed another complaint about his motorcycle. Why won't anyone do anything about this menace? February 18th, maybe if I call the police enough times they'll finally arrest him for something. February 20th, I need to make them understand how dangerous he is. Next time I call 911 I'll make sure they take it seriously. The journal revealed that Linda's false report wasn't a moment of panic or confusion, it was a premeditated plan to use law enforcement as a weapon against me. Agent Martinez briefed the media on the investigation's findings. Mrs. Brennan engaged in a months-long campaign of harassment against her neighbor, culminating in false reports to emergency services that directly led to the shooting of Governor Rodriguez, he announced. This case demonstrates how hate and prejudice can have devastating consequences for entire communities. The investigation also revealed that Linda had used similar tactics against other minority residents over the years. The Rodriguez family had moved away after Linda repeatedly called immigration authorities, even though they were U.S. citizens. An elderly black couple had sold their house after Linda filed dozens of noise complaints whenever they had family gatherings. Linda Brennan used fear and false reports as weapons, Agent Martinez explained. She weaponized the system against anyone who didn't fit her narrow definition of who belonged in the neighborhood. Governor Rodriguez survived the surgery, but her recovery was long and difficult. The bullet had caused significant damage to her lung and chest cavity, requiring multiple operations and months of rehabilitation. I visited her in the hospital every day, feeling responsible for what had happened even though everyone told me it wasn't my fault. David, she said during one of our conversations, you saved my life that night. Your quick thinking and medical training are the only reason I'm still here. Governor, I'm so sorry this happened to you, I replied. If I had just moved away when Linda started harassing me, none of this would have happened. She shook her head firmly. Don't you dare blame yourself. You had every right to live in that house, in that neighborhood, in peace. What happened to me is the consequence of one person's hatred and the system's failure to stop it. As she recovered, Governor Rodriguez used her experience to push for stronger laws against false reporting and hate-motivated harassment. She worked with legislators to create the Truth in Emergency Reporting Act, which imposed serious criminal penalties for knowingly false 911 calls. What happened to me could have happened to David, or to any innocent person who becomes the target of someone's prejudice, she said in a speech to the state legislature. We cannot allow emergency services to be weaponized against law-abiding citizens. Linda Brennan's trial began 8 months after the shooting. She faced federal charges of filing false reports, civil rights violations, and felony charges related to Governor Rodriguez's shooting. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence of Linda's harassment campaign and the premeditated nature of her false 911 calls. The journal entries, complaint documents, and testimony from neighbors painted a clear picture of escalating hatred that culminated in tragedy. Linda's defense attorney tried to portray her as a scared elderly woman who made an honest mistake, but the evidence was too strong. My client was simply concerned about neighborhood safety, the lawyer argued. She never intended for anyone to be hurt. But the prosecutor, U.S. Attorney James Wilson, destroyed that argument with Linda's own words. The defendant kept detailed records of her neighbor's activities, he told the jury. She researched methods to get him evicted. She wrote in her journal about making police take it seriously the next time she called. This was not a mistake, it was a calculated plan to use law enforcement as a weapon. The most damaging testimony came from Officer Peterson, the young officer who had fired the shot that wounded Governor Rodriguez. I was told we were responding to multiple dangerous suspects threatening the governor, he testified, tears streaming down his face. I thought I was protecting her. The false information I received directly led to my decision to draw and fire my weapon. The jury deliberated for only 4 hours before finding Linda guilty on all charges. She was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison and ordered to pay millions in restitution for medical expenses, security costs, and damages to the community. As she was led away in handcuffs, Linda finally showed emotion, not remorse for what she had done, but anger at being held accountable. This is all his fault, she screamed, pointing at me in the courtroom. If he had just stayed where he belonged, none of this would have happened. Her final words revealed that even facing prison, Linda still believed her hatred was justified. The shooting of Governor Rodriguez became a turning point for our community and our state. The tragedy sparked conversations about implicit bias, the weaponization of emergency services, and the responsibility of communities to address hate before it escalates to violence. Cedar Falls implemented new programs for conflict resolution and bias training. The police department created protocols for verifying emergency calls and identifying potential false reports. The HOA system was reformed to prevent harassment and discrimination. Most importantly, neighbors began talking to each other in ways they never had before. Tom organized monthly community meetings where residents could discuss concerns and resolve conflicts peacefully. Mrs. Patterson started a neighborhood watch program focused on supporting vulnerable residents rather than surveilling them. We learned that silence in the face of hate is complicity, Tom told the group at one of our meetings. We all saw what Linda was doing to David, but we didn't act. We can't let that happen again. My house on Oakwood Drive became a symbol of resilience and belonging. The new residents who moved into Linda's old house, a young immigrant family from Somalia, were welcomed warmly by neighbors who had learned from our community's mistakes. I continued working as a paramedic, but I also began speaking at conferences and training sessions about the consequences of false emergency reports. My experience became part of training programs for dispatchers and first responders across the country. When someone calls 911 with false information, it puts everyone at risk, I would tell audiences. The person being reported, the officers responding, and innocent bystanders who might be caught in the confusion. We all have a responsibility to ensure emergency services are used honestly and appropriately. Governor Rodriguez made a full recovery and was re-elected by the largest margin in state history. Her experience as a shooting victim gave her unique credibility in pushing for police reform and community relations improvements. She established the Rodriguez Foundation for Community Healing, which provided resources for neighborhoods dealing with hate and discrimination. The foundation's first project was right here in Cedar Falls, helping our community process the trauma of that terrible night. What happened to me was tragic, but it also revealed something important about our society, she said at the foundation's launch event. Hate doesn't just hurt its immediate targets, it damages entire communities. Healing requires everyone to participate. The governor often visited Oakwood Drive, not as a political figure but as a neighbor and friend. She would sit on my front porch, sharing stories about her recovery and her continued work for justice. David, she told me during one of these visits, I know you still carry guilt about that night. But I want you to understand something, you are not responsible for Linda Brennan's choices. You are only responsible for your own response to what happened. And your response has been extraordinary. You could have moved away, hidden from the publicity, blamed the system. Instead you stayed, spoke out and helped our community heal. That takes courage. 5 years have passed since that terrible February night. Linda Brennan is serving her sentence in federal prison, where she reportedly still maintains that she did nothing wrong. Officer Peterson left law enforcement and now works as a counselor helping police officers deal with trauma from critical incidents. Governor Rodriguez serves her second term with distinction, having implemented some of the most progressive police reform and community relations programs in the country. The Truth in Emergency Reporting Act has been adopted by 12 states and has significantly reduced false 911 calls nationwide. I still live at 428 Oakwood Drive. My garage door opener works perfectly, and I use it every day without fear. The neighborhood has become a model for inclusive community building, with residents from diverse backgrounds living together in genuine harmony. But the lessons from that night go beyond our small community. Across the country, people have learned about the dangers of allowing hate to fester unchallenged. They've seen how one person's prejudice can destroy lives and traumatize entire communities. The story also revealed something important about heroism. Governor Rodriguez didn't become a hero because she was shot. She was already a hero because of her lifelong commitment to justice. I'm not a hero for saving her life, I was just doing what my training and conscience demanded. The real heroes are the neighbors who learned from their silence and chose to speak up. The community leaders who used tragedy as motivation for positive change. The voters who supported reform even when it was difficult. Most importantly, our story shows that hate can be overcome, but only when communities choose love and action over fear and silence. Every morning when I leave for work, I wave to my neighbors who see me as David the paramedic, David the friend, David the guy who makes the best barbecue on the street. Every evening when I come home, I press that garage door opener with gratitude for the community that finally chose to stand together. Linda Brennan tried to use fear and hatred to define our neighborhood. Instead, she helped us discover that we could choose understanding and acceptance. In the end, love won. But the victory came at a terrible price that should never have been necessary. The empty house at 426 Oakwood Drive now belongs to the Osman family, refugees from Somalia who have become beloved members of our community. Their children play with kids from all over the neighborhood, and their front yard garden has become a gathering place for neighbors of all backgrounds. Sometimes I watch those children playing together, laughing, sharing toys, completely oblivious to the differences that once divided their elders, and I'm reminded that this is what Linda Brennan feared most. A community where everyone belongs, where difference is celebrated rather than feared, where home truly means home for everyone. That fear almost destroyed us all. But in the end it only made us stronger.